But you have a community of your own. I believe 800 female CEOs.
Yes, 850.
Out of those 850 female CEOs that are entrepreneurial, how many of them do you think have got ADHD?
They tend to do a lot. They have several degrees, like 3-4 studies, or they study 2 degrees in one time, and they still feel they're not enough.
It confirms what we've been saying and believing, and that a lot of people with ADHD become entrepreneurs because the only way they can find the square hole for their square peg is to invent their own square hole.
I allow all the women who come to my, let's say, to events, to meetings, to be imperfect. So basically allowing themselves to make mistakes, to not to be perfect.
To think that you could have a lot of senior people in very senior positions not believing in themselves despite their success.
Martina, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm very aware that you moved a flight and changed your plans to be here, which really piques my interest in just kind of how important this conversation is and that your sort of journey with ADHD.
Yes.
I'd love to dive straight into that. You know, for you to change plans, shift flight back, why is this conversation so important?
I was diagnosed 2 years ago with my ADHD, and after having this diagnosis, many things fall into place. I am entrepreneur myself, coming from the perspective I know now, and from the perspective of being a child, a girl, back in 80s, 90s. The ADHD wasn't really that common in girls. The stereotype of ADHD was only basically you can spot a boy that couldn't sit still. So that was the view on ADHD back then. But to be honest, I think the diagnosis back then was a little bit perceived negative. Like somebody had ADHD, so you're different, you're not getting good grades, your behavior, let's say, in a classroom, it's not how it should be. I remember myself being a little bit of an outsider, but at the same time, I had a lot of friends, but from, like different circles, I would say. That circle. But I also think I couldn't really open up myself to anyone at that time. I mean, I had a lot of friends, but I was shy at that time. I was super shy, a girl. I was constantly in my head, in my kind of, let's say, a lot of visionary thoughts. In a classroom, I remember just being somewhere in my head. I wasn't really paying attention to what's going on in the class. However, I had one of the best grades. So that's a lot of contradictions here. And I remember when I was actually doing my diagnosis, doctor asked me about childhood as well. So maybe, I don't know, 5-7 years, when I was 5-7, I remember I was more interested to build stuff, to do more creative things rather than, I don't know, a lot of my girlfriends at the time, they were playing Barbies, but I was more interested to build houses for those Barbies. I was more interested to have a screwdriver. And I remember in high school later on, because I'm an architect from profession. So first of all, I went to high school with art profile, and then I went to Glasgow School of Art for study architecture. But I remember in high school, we had a lot of sculpture, painting lessons, they were 4-hour long slots. And I remember immersive myself in those classes, like totally. I was gone. And when it comes to, I don't know, mathematics, English, all the, like normal subjects, no attention at all. And a funny story I tell my friends is that I had, for the whole 4-year period of my high school, I had one notebook, and I had all subjects in one notebook. So I was writing mathematics in front. In the middle was English, let's say, physics, and the other side was some other subject. So I had one notebook, which the head teacher wasn't really happy with me at that time.
To roll that back, you sort of subjects that you weren't passionate about, you just didn't get passionate about.
Yes.
Hard to apply yourself to. The subject that you were passionate about, you could immerse yourself for 4 hours solid and really embrace it. And that's very, very common for people with ADHD. And obviously, you know, from what we know about your life story as a woman with ADHD, growing up in an era where ADHD was about boys, you were overlooked and missed for your ADHD, despite all those signals and signs that you just articulated so well being there. What caused you to go and get an assessment for ADHD later in life? What was it that drove you to that then?
I felt slightly different. This was a time that, I used to work on quite big projects with, let's say, great leaders in tech scene. And, I could walk into the boardroom and I could spot things that people actually perhaps they couldn't spot. The something that it wasn't said loud in those meetings. Some interactions, I could sense something more depth to understanding certain situations, and in general the creativity as well, because I apply my creativity a lot into along with analytical skills, and usually because I work a lot with business models, I create business models that are different, or I try to create something that could stand out on the market. So I think the way my brain works, it wasn't common. So it wasn't really let's say day by day that I decided to get my diagnosis, but it took me some time as well because of my procrastination. But I started to read about it because 2-3 years ago, more and more articles were out there. So I was like, okay, so maybe there is something about me that maybe I do have ADHD or something else, perhaps ADD. There are, different forms of neurodiversity. But yeah, I just wanted to see if I am normal or actually I am different normal.
Yeah.
Neuronormal, if there is such a thing.
Absolutely. So
we met through the entrepreneur community.
Right.
Something called Ideas Fest.
Right.
Yeah. Which brings so many entrepreneurs together. And I know, and we can bring this into the conversation now, that you have a community of your own. I believe 800 female CEOs.
Yes. 850.
So I love the fact that you identified you've got this kind of intuition for when you potentially are getting a vibration, a feeling of someone that maybe they've got what you've got, and what might that be, which leads to you then getting a diagnosis. My question to you is, out of those 850 female CEOs that are entrepreneurial, that you potentially can relate to, hence brought this community together, how many of them do you think have got ADHD?
In my opinion, 30-40%. That's only how I perceive it, or from conversations that I had one-to-one with, not with everybody. I do not know everyone in person, but I know maybe, I don't know, 200 ladies, let's say, in person who joined at the very beginning. So we had a lot of conversations and applications forms as well. And they tend to do a lot. So that was kind of first thing. They have several degrees, like 3-4 studies, or they study 2 degrees in one time, and they still feel they're not enough.
Wow. And yet there's a narrative where being very academic clearly means that you're not ADHD. But actually the fact that some of these people are doing 2 courses at once whilst probably doing multiple other things is very ADHD.
Yes. Imposter syndrome. It's super common in
and that
women.
drives more and more. It's back to the conversations we've previously had about seeking that dopamine hit and filling the void. You will never achieve what it is you're seeking in that dopamine world. And 2 things come out of that for me, Martina. One is, so if we say 40% of 850 people in your estimation, which is, workable because you come from lived experience and also very bright, very intelligent and living in that world. So that's 40% against the known percentage of people in society is 5%. So that 35% skews that number that says women, not necessarily fitting into a more normalized pathway of employment, have gone out and sought some form of entrepreneurial leadership, CEO type of position. And it confirms what we've been saying and believing, and the book says that a lot of people with ADHD become entrepreneurs because the only way they can find the square hole for their square peg is to invent their own square hole.
Absolutely.
And it's very interesting to talk to you about senior influential women in those roles, because the likelihood is that the square pegs weren't availing themselves. They couldn't find, people weren't accepting. Going back to, they were looking for boys to have ADHD. As a woman in that era, you just didn't fit in. You just weren't the right person, and misunderstood and missed challenges. I liken it, if I'm going to go completely off piece now, allow me to go off piece for a second. When back in the policing days, an amazing man that I worked for and subsequently worked with, Jack Riggs, we were talking about why in areas like where I was working at the time, were nearly all the taxi drivers Asian. And it's a challenging question, and it's one that some people may not actually articulate the debate over. But when you start to chat to, because they couldn't find to fit in within, 20, 30 years ago, couldn't find work, a fit, whatever, because they were different. And therefore, by creating a self-employed kind of community of workers, they started to fit. Does that make sense? This sort of, and that's not about being racist. That's about where people of racial minority were at that time. Women of that time who were neurodivergent would not be able to fit in. The parallel between race and neurodivergence, I think, can be quite strong in some articulations of what fits, what works. And I think the debate gets quite deep then and quite interesting. You're doing all this amazing work with very high powered people and female CEOs. What's the most common thing you see in them that might be a positive of their ADHD, do you think?
Flexibility. Flexibility. Again, I need to say the creativity as well, because it applies to different fields, different sectors, but flexibility as well. I think because they have so many degrees, they can fit in so many roles
Mhm.
out of the sudden, in my opinion. So, she could be let's say a doctor, but then suddenly she can do social media almost full time on a side, kind of advising, followers on what she does in the practice. So basically, kind of the application of skills I can see clearly as a pattern, and I would say, because all the women seems to they want, maybe they do not want to overachieve, but they overachieve naturally.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is a common thing that I see, but at the same time, because sometimes I also consult founders one-to-one, and oftentimes women on very high positions, then they come to me and we talk about price tags in terms of how much money she should charge a client, or she works on certain projects, or she just got a job that is maybe higher than usual. And also what I see, they tend to underprice themselves as well. So with all the positive things, they still undervalue themselves.
Which is indicative of undervaluing themselves, and I think you mentioned earlier imposter syndrome.
Yes. So there are things, that's for normal person probably. It's an obvious question, like why you're charging so low, or why you're on or lower professional position in your company, and then yeah.
So I guess what we're articulating there is that in your experience, which is vast and which is an incredible network you've built of senior, powerful, influential women, there's still, despite all of that influence and position of seniority, perhaps an ADHD-based imposter syndrome, self-doubt, masking scenario, that success in the boardroom, success on a business card or on a hierarchical tree of an organization belies the fact that that human, that individual, still suffers from the things that we talk about of low self-esteem, low feeling of value, low feeling of worth. And if that's driven by an ADHD set of behaviors that go back to childhood and go back to all of the things that you articulated so well there about don't like that subject, not motivated by that subject, not going to achieve that subject, that goes forward. And we see it so often, don't we? But we've never talked about it in a conglomerate of a female leadership team spread across a vast geography and different organizations. It's quite fascinating to think that you could have a lot of senior people in very senior positions, all female, 40% of them ADHD, not believing in themselves despite their success. And I think that's the lesson at this point for people watching this, isn't it?
Yeah. Can I take that into the flipping it to your experience? Because I've got my daughters sort of in my head now, 14, 16-year-old girls coming through in a world where less than 2% of VC funding goes to female founders. So I've lent into this, and my question there is why? And actually, it's you can't be what you can't see. It's the role model element of the fact that actually a lot of girls don't back themselves and have the self-belief because they can't actually identify with other women performing. And I feel like that's actually been changing and shifting. So I would love to take everything Phil just said there, and that kind of thought of the fact that I want my two girls to come into a world where they can back themselves, and what needs to shift as a narrative, if you like, and what are you able to do with this amazing community you've got with women that are literally, kicking ass in business? What's the message back? Do you know what I mean? What's the message that my girls and the next generation can learn from?
Yes. so I will comment on this two feedbacks. So basically, perfectionism, because also I forgot to add about being a perfectionist. So that's why I allow all the women who come to my, let's say, to events, to meetings, to be imperfect. So once, so let's say, once I created, let's say, the Imperfect CEO space, suddenly those ladies who come to see us, at the meetings, they just drop the armor. So basically allowing themselves to make mistakes, to actually not to be perfect, because I think a lot of women with ADHD, because of imposter syndrome, they think they need to be perfect. So this is the major, let's say, advice I give to those ladies. If you do something, just do it 70-80%, and that's good enough. And then iterate, pivot if you need, with the business or with whatever you do. So for the young generation, perhaps it will be easier as well because of the knowledge that is out there already, and maybe in 10 years it will be normal that people will diagnose themselves earlier. And it's gonna be normal. But yeah, the perfectionism is the killer, in my opinion, of a career, of a, yeah.
Especially if that's born of low self-esteem.
Yes.
And then, so is the message for the next generation, especially the next generation of girls becoming women, you are allowed to fail.
Yes.
Fail fast, learn quicker.
Yes.
And trying to create that culture, especially in a neurodivergent world where there'll be a fear of failure because there's been failure as a track record, failure in the mindset of the human, not necessarily failure. Sort of many people we talk to who've got ADHD say, why can't I do this as quickly as the person sat next to me? Why can't I apparently do this as easily as the person sat next to me? And yet you're probably producing a better output, but that's clearly resonating with you. So there is a message to that generation coming through of you're more than good enough and you are allowed to fail. But I think there's a counter measure there is, and that's part of the remove the shame and change the narrative. Those backers, those investors, those commentators, those coaches, those mentors like you're providing have actually got to create an environment where people can fail.
That's what I was going to say, which is credit to Martina, to create a safe space where people can not come and in any way be expected to be performing.
Perfect. Yeah. And the woman in the workplace that is demonstrative in a male-dominated environment is not demonstrative through good leadership, is often demonstrative because she's in the mood, is demonstrative because she's having a bad period or it's the wrong time of the month. And society is still male-led. ADHD is still male-dominated. We haven't yet got to the position of a level playing field for your audience to go out and play a game based on the same set of rules. So there is work to do coaching the next generation, your girls, but there's also a lot of work to do in the organizational setting. And 850 CEOs who are female, that's a huge opportunity for change in itself, isn't it? Because they are setting a pathway and a culture in their own organization. And I don't think we've ever got the opportunity to discuss before the might of female CEOs, female entrepreneurs, and how that can be harnessed. And if there was a 101 for women leaders, the thing they've got a responsibility to do is create the next generation's pathway easy. Yeah, we can deal with them in the here and now for themselves, but perhaps their role is to create it for your girls. And that I don't know what's after Generation Z. We've run out of letters, haven't we? Do we go back to A? what's the next generation going to need? And they're going to need that empathy that you and your organisation bring in. And I think your ADHD will feed into their feelings, whether they're the 40% or the 60%. Your empathy will feed them, and even, dare I suggest it, this conversation sparks off a new set of thoughts as to what's the responsibility. What we talk about our global responsibility, what's our environmental, sustainable, responsible position. Maybe CEOs need to be creating an environment where the neurodivergent can be playing on an equal playing field, where the women can play on an equal playing field to the men, and we don't end up only having taxi drivers from one particular subcontinent.
Yeah, it's the infrastructure and the culture that needs to change.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And if we through people like yourself are able to create that, then we do create demonstrable change.
Yeah.
And that's
is that an active part of the conversation in the community? I'm conscious of time.
Yes.
But that's because it's really insightful that you've not. Yeah, great.
I want to comment on this. When it was an event, a big event, 120 ladies, mid-seniors only. And I remember I was after my diagnosis, but I wasn't particularly kind of showing this, talking about this. I needed to digest it myself first. But then at this event, you know, I do usually opening of the events, 5-minute speech, and I said, ladies, I have ADHD. That was the first sentence. And I want to share with you that, I finally understood my brain, how my brain works, why certain things in life happened the way it happened. And I want to open the discussion here about our vulnerabilities here. And if you would like to talk, I'm here. And also because of my doctors, I had my diagnosis with. I can share contacts if you need or if you feel. So after this event, it was a lot of conversation behind the scenes or during networking as well. And so actually after it all happened, I had conversation one-to-one with my members, and that's why I can see that there is about 30-40% of those ladies with ADHD.
Martina, you bring an international perspective, a female perspective, and a lived experience perspective to open up the debate at that higher level, and also give us thoughts for change and for the future. Thank you ever so much for changing your travel plans and coming to talk to us. It's been an enlightening conversation that's touched in an area in a way that we've never had the opportunity to touch before, in an articulate way that I think will spring into a slightly different audience for us of understanding and message passing. So hats off to you. Keep doing what you do. It's amazing. Please be who you are continually. You're very authentic to yourself, and that's good to see. And thank you.
Thanks so much.
I really enjoyed talking to you. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.